If you are a man over 60, listen very carefully to this. The biggest mistake older men make today is not losing money, not losing their health, and not even ending up alone. It is allowing the wrong woman to enter their life and quietly take away the very thing they spent decades working to build, their peace. That may sound harsh, and some people will disagree with it immediately. In fact, some may already be thinking, are you saying older men should avoid relationships altogether? Not at all. But before you make that judgment, stay with me until the end of this discussion. Because what we're about to explore isn't really about women. It's about protecting your emotional well-being, preserving your quality of life, and understanding the psychology behind companionship after 60. And before we go any further, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a relationship that brought more stress than happiness? Or perhaps you've experienced the opposite, a relationship that made life richer and more peaceful. Share your experience in the comments below. Your story may help another man who is struggling with the same questions. These conversations are important because many older men are dealing with challenges they rarely talk about openly. I'm Mary Smith, host of Senior Mindful Living YouTube channel. Let's be honest about something many people are afraid to admit. By the time a man reaches his 60s, life begins to look very different than it did at 30. The goals that once seemed so important often lose their power. The desire to impress others fades. The need to prove yourself becomes less urgent. What rises to the surface instead is something much deeper. Peace. A peaceful morning, a peaceful home, peaceful conversations, peaceful sleep. After decades of working, sacrificing, raising families, solving problems, surviving disappointments, and carrying responsibilities, many men reach a point where they finally understand that happiness is often found in simplicity. And that's exactly why the wrong relationship can become so costly. I remember reading about a retired gentleman named Robert. After losing his wife of 40 years, he spent nearly 5 years living alone. At first, the silence felt unbearable. He hated eating dinner by himself. He hated the empty house. He hated waking up without someone beside him. Then he met someone. Initially, everything felt wonderful. They talked for hours. They traveled together. Friends told him he looked younger and happier. For the first year, he felt like he had been given a second chance at life. But gradually, things changed. Small disagreements became frequent arguments. Every decision became a negotiation. Every personal boundary required an explanation. What began as companionship slowly transformed into obligation. One day, Robert said something that stayed with me. He said, I wasn't lonely anymore, but somehow I had less peace than when I was alone. That statement reveals something important about human psychology. Loneliness and peace are not the same thing. Many people assume that if loneliness disappears, happiness automatically appears. Unfortunately, life doesn't work that way. You can be surrounded by people and still feel emotionally drained. You can be in a relationship and still feel isolated. And perhaps most surprisingly, you can live alone and feel deeply content. This is one of the most important lessons older men must understand. The first issue many men face after 60 is emotional exhaustion. When you're younger, you often have greater emotional capacity. You can tolerate more drama. You recover faster from conflict. You have more energy to navigate misunderstandings, disagreements, and emotional ups and downs. But aging changes priorities. As we grow older, our emotional resources become more valuable. Think about it this way. When you were younger, losing an evening to an argument felt frustrating. After 60, losing an evening to unnecessary stress feels expensive. Because you understand something younger people often don't. Time matters. Energy matters. Peace matters. Psychologists often describe emotional energy as a limited resource. Every difficult conversation, every conflict, every stressful interaction withdraws from that account. The question is simple. Who is making deposits into your emotional account? And who is constantly making withdrawals? The healthiest relationships create emotional safety. You leave conversations feeling lighter. You feel understood. You feel respected. You feel accepted. The wrong relationships create the opposite experience. You find yourself walking on eggshells. You carefully monitor your words. You avoid certain topics. You feel responsible for managing another person's emotions. And eventually, what should feel like companionship begins to feel like work. Now, let's be fair. This isn't a problem caused by women. It's a problem caused by unhealthy dynamics. There are wonderful women who bring peace, warmth, and emotional stability into a man's life. But there are also relationships where emotional demands become overwhelming. The key is learning how to recognize the difference. One useful exercise is something psychologists call the energy audit. For the next week, pay attention to how you feel after interacting with different people. Not during the interaction, after. Do you feel calm or exhausted? Do you feel energized or depleted? Do you feel respected or pressured? Your nervous system often tells the truth long before your mind is willing to acknowledge it. And that brings us to another issue many older men underestimate: financial vulnerability. Now, this conversation isn't about being stingy. It's not about refusing to share, and it's certainly not about treating relationships as business transactions. It's about understanding how financial decisions change after retirement. When you're 40 years old, a financial mistake may cost you a few years. When you're 65 or 70, a financial mistake can affect the rest of your life. That's reality. Many men enter relationships believing they are simply being generous. They pay for dinners, they pay for trips, they help with expenses, they buy gifts. And individually, none of these actions seem problematic. The danger is rarely found in one decision. The danger exists in patterns. Psychologists have long observed that people become emotionally attached to behaviors they repeatedly perform. The more you invest in something, the harder it becomes to evaluate it objectively. This phenomenon is called the sunk cost effect. A man may continue supporting a relationship not because it makes him happy, but because he has already invested so much into it: time, money, energy, hope. The deeper the investment becomes, the harder it becomes to walk away. This is especially true when loneliness enters the equation. Loneliness can distort judgment. It can convince intelligent people to accept situations they would normally reject. Have you ever noticed how people sometimes ignore obvious red flags because they fear losing someone? That's not weakness. That's human psychology. The fear of loss often becomes stronger than the desire for wisdom. And that's why self-awareness is so important. Before entering any serious relationship, ask yourself an uncomfortable question. If this person disappeared tomorrow, would I still be financially secure? If the answer is no, you may already be giving away too much. Another challenge many men face after 60 is the gradual loss of personal freedom. This issue is rarely discussed because it unfolds so slowly. Nobody wakes up one morning and suddenly realizes their freedom is gone. Instead, it disappears one compromise at a time. One canceled hobby, one abandoned routine, one postponed goal, one unnecessary obligation, until eventually, life begins revolving around maintaining the relationship. I once spoke with a retired fisherman who spent years looking forward to retirement. He imagined quiet mornings on the lake, weekend road trips, fishing with old friends, reading books he never had time to read. After entering a relationship, he gradually stopped doing many of those things. Not because anyone forced him, but because expectations slowly replaced independence. Years later, he confessed something heartbreaking. He said, "I finally had the freedom I worked my entire life for, and I gave it away without realizing it." That statement contains a lesson worth remembering. Freedom is not selfishness. Freedom is the ability to live according to your values. Freedom is having control over your schedule. Freedom is being able to choose how your time is spent. And after 60, time becomes one of your most precious assets. Unlike money, time cannot be earned back. Every day matters. Every year matters. Every healthy season of life matters. That's why the most fulfilled older men become highly selective about who receives access to their lives. Not because they are cold, not because they are bitter, but because experience has taught them something younger men are still learning. Every relationship carries a cost. The question is whether the value exceeds the cost. And this leads us directly into one of the most dangerous psychological traps older men face: confusing attention with respect. At first glance, the two feel almost identical, especially if you've experienced loneliness, retirement, divorce, or the loss of a spouse. When someone suddenly takes interest in your life, it feels wonderful. You feel seen, you feel appreciated, you feel important. For many older men, that feeling can be incredibly powerful. But here's where things become complicated. Attention is easy to give. Respect is much harder. Attention often depends on circumstances. Respect reflects character. Attention can disappear when conditions change. Respect remains during difficult moments. The mistake many men make is becoming so grateful for attention that they stop evaluating whether they are genuinely respected. And that distinction can determine whether a relationship becomes a source of peace or a source of regret. The deeper question is not whether someone enjoys your company. The deeper question is whether they respect your boundaries, your time, your values, your independence, and the life you've worked so hard to build. Because attention may feel good, but respect is what creates lasting peace. And in the next part, we're going to explore why loneliness can become one of the most deceptive forces in a man's life after 60, how emotional stress directly affects physical health, why some men slowly lose their identity inside relationships without realizing it, and the powerful mindset shift that helps the happiest older men build fulfilling lives, whether they're single or in a relationship. If you're finding value in this conversation, take a moment to subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And before you go, tell me in the comments, what do you value most at this stage of life? Love, freedom, peace, or purpose? I read as many comments as I can, and your answer may spark an important conversation for others as well. One of the most misunderstood challenges men face after 60. Loneliness. Most people assume loneliness is simply the absence of company. But psychologists have discovered that loneliness is often far more complex than that. It is not merely being alone. It is feeling disconnected from meaning, purpose, and genuine human connection. And this is where many older men make decisions they later regret. Imagine a man who spent 40 years working. His days were structured, his schedule was full. His responsibilities gave him a clear sense of purpose. Then, retirement arrives. At first, it feels liberating. No alarms, no deadlines, no demanding schedule. But after the novelty fades, something unexpected often appears. The days become longer. The house becomes quieter. The phone rings less often. And suddenly, there is far more time to think. What many men interpret as a need for romance is sometimes a need for purpose. That distinction matters, because a relationship can distract you from loneliness temporarily, but it cannot create purpose for you. Purpose must come from within. Research consistently shows that people who maintain meaningful activities, strong friendships, community involvement, physical activity, and personal interests experience greater long-term life satisfaction than those who rely on a romantic relationship as their primary source of happiness. Think about the happiest older men you've known. Many of them stay active. They volunteer. They mentor younger people. They travel. They learn new skills. They participate in community groups. They pursue hobbies that challenge and inspire them. Their lives have direction. As a result, they approach relationships differently. They aren't searching for someone to rescue them. They're looking for someone to share an already meaningful life with. That mindset changes everything. Because when you no longer need someone to complete your life, you become much more capable of recognizing whether they truly belong in it. A wise man once shared a simple observation. He said, "The best relationships begin when two whole people meet, not when two lonely people try to fix each other." There is tremendous wisdom in that statement. When loneliness drives your decisions, you become vulnerable. You overlook warning signs. You rationalize unhealthy behavior. You tolerate situations that disturb your peace. But when fulfillment already exists within your life, you gain the ability to choose wisely rather than emotionally. And that brings us to something many older men rarely consider until it begins affecting them directly: the physical cost of emotional stress. For decades, many men pride themselves on their ability to endure pressure. They work through stress. They push through fatigue. They handle problems without complaint. But the body changes with age. After 60, emotional stress often leaves a deeper mark than it once did. Doctors and researchers have repeatedly found connections between chronic stress and numerous health concerns: sleep disturbances, elevated blood pressure, increased fatigue, reduced immune function, difficulty concentrating, lower overall quality of life. The body and mind are not separate systems. They are deeply connected. When your emotional world becomes chaotic, your physical health often pays part of the price. Think about the last time you experienced prolonged stress. Perhaps you struggled to sleep. Maybe your appetite changed. Perhaps you felt constantly tired, even after resting. Maybe your patience became shorter. These are not signs of weakness. They are signals from the nervous system. The body is communicating. It's saying something is out of balance. Unfortunately, many older men spend years focusing on physical health while overlooking emotional health. They exercise regularly. They attend medical appointments. They monitor their diet. Yet they remain in situations that create constant emotional turmoil. It's like carefully maintaining a car while continuously driving it on a road filled with potholes. Eventually, damage occurs. This is why protecting your peace is not merely a lifestyle preference. It is a health strategy. A peaceful life supports better sleep. Better sleep supports better health. Better health creates more energy. More energy allows you to enjoy life. Everything becomes connected. This leads us to another hidden consequence of unhealthy relationships: the gradual loss of identity. Few things are more heartbreaking than watching someone slowly become a stranger to themselves. And yet, it happens more often than people realize. Not through dramatic events, not through sudden change, but through small compromises repeated over time. At first, those compromises seem harmless. You stop attending a weekly activity. You spend less time with old friends. You set aside a hobby. You alter a routine. You silence an opinion. You avoid certain conversations. None of these decisions seem significant by themselves, but eventually they begin forming a pattern. A man who once felt independent starts organizing his life around avoiding conflict. He becomes less authentic, less expressive, less connected to the person he truly is. The tragedy is that many people mistake this process for love. They believe sacrificing pieces of themselves proves commitment, but healthy love does not require self-erasure. Healthy companionship should strengthen your identity, not weaken it. The right person encourages your interests. The right person respects your individuality. The right person celebrates your growth. The right person wants you to remain yourself. One question can reveal a great deal about any relationship. Ask yourself this: am I becoming more myself in this relationship, or less myself? The answer often reveals more than months of analysis ever could. The happiest relationships create expansion, the unhealthy ones create contraction. And this brings us to an important realization. The most fulfilled men over 60 are not necessarily the wealthiest. They are not necessarily the most attractive. They are not necessarily the most socially connected. Very often, they are simply the most selective. They understand that every person entering their life influences their emotional environment. Every conversation matters. Every habit matters. Every relationship matters. Instead of asking, "Do I like her?" they ask deeper questions. How do I feel after spending time with her? Do I feel peaceful or pressured? Do I feel respected or managed? Does this relationship support the life I've built or complicate it? Those questions produce remarkably honest answers. And perhaps the greatest lesson many older men eventually learn is that companionship exists in many forms. Society often treats romance as the ultimate source of fulfillment, but life teaches a more nuanced truth. Some of the most meaningful connections come through friendship, community, family, shared interests, purpose-driven activities, meaningful conversations, trusted companions. A man does not need romance to experience connection. He needs genuine relationships. There is a difference. Some friendships provide more emotional support than romantic relationships. Some community groups provide more belonging than dating ever could. Some hobbies create deeper fulfillment than companionship alone. The goal is not simply avoiding loneliness. The goal is creating a rich, meaningful life. And once that life exists, every relationship can be evaluated through a different lens. Not desperation, not fear, not boredom, but wisdom. This is why fulfilled older men protect their energy so carefully. They understand that time has become their most valuable currency. Money can sometimes be replaced. Lost opportunities often cannot. A wasted year matters. A stressful year matters. An unhappy year matters. Every season of life becomes increasingly precious, and because of that, they become extremely intentional about who receives access to their world. Eventually, this selectiveness leads to a powerful realization. Fulfillment and romance are not the same thing. Many people spend decades believing happiness is found through relationships alone, but experience often reveals a different truth. Happiness comes from alignment. Alignment between your values and your daily life. Alignment between your priorities and your choices. Alignment between who you are and how you spend your time. Relationships can enhance that alignment, but they cannot create it for you. The happiest men after 60 typically share several characteristics. They maintain routines that support their health. They cultivate friendships that support their emotional well-being. They engage in activities that create purpose. They remain curious about life. They continue growing. Most importantly, they take responsibility for their own happiness. They do not expect another person to carry that responsibility for them. As a result, any relationship they enter becomes a bonus rather than a necessity. That perspective is incredibly powerful, because when you no longer need a relationship to feel complete, you become capable of recognizing whether a relationship genuinely improves your life. And that is the real question every older man should ask. Not, can I find companionship? Not, can I avoid being alone? But rather, does this relationship add peace to my life? Because peace is not a small thing. Peace affects your health. Peace affects your happiness. Peace affects your relationships with family and friends. Peace affects the quality of every day you have left. The right relationship can absolutely add value. The right woman can bring warmth, companionship, laughter, support, and joy. But the wrong relationship can quietly consume energy, freedom, stability, and emotional well-being. That is why wisdom becomes so important after 60. Wisdom teaches you to evaluate honestly rather than emotionally. Wisdom teaches you to observe patterns rather than promises. Wisdom teaches you to protect what truly matters. At the end of the day, every man must make his own choices. Some will find wonderful relationships that enrich their lives for years to come. Others will discover that fulfillment exists perfectly well without romance. Neither path is inherently right or wrong. What matters is making decisions from a place of clarity rather than fear, from purpose rather than loneliness, from wisdom rather than impulse. And perhaps the most important lesson of all is this. After 60, the goal is not finding someone to complete your life. The goal is building a life so meaningful, so peaceful, and so fulfilling that anyone who enters it must contribute positively to what already exists. Protect your peace, protect your health, protect your freedom, protect your identity. Those are treasures that took decades to build. And before we finish, I'd love to hear your perspective. Do you believe companionship becomes more important or less important after 60? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experience may help someone who is facing these very questions today. If you enjoyed this discussion, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend who might benefit from hearing it. Here on Senior Mindful Living, we're committed to helping you navigate life's most important challenges with wisdom, confidence, and purpose. Thank you for spending this time with me, and remember this simple question whenever a new person enters your life. Do they bring peace or pressure? The answer may tell you everything you need to know.